The Akiba's Trip franchise has been focused on handhelds pretty much since its inception. The original game was on the PlayStation Portable. The sequel was multi-platform between the Vita PC and big console PlayStations, and the less liked Akiba's Beat made sure the Vita was a part of its release as well. So after Akiba's Trip 1 was remade for PS4 and a Switch, it was only a matter of time until the sequel came back to the handheld world. In the form of a director's cut with a true ending route, let's take a look. Here is my review of Akiba's Trip Undead and Undressed Director's Cut for the Nintendo Switch. The story of this game takes place in the otaku-rich place of Akiba. The protag goes to a job interview where the pay is advertised as rare anime figurines, only to be duped by the organization and turned into an energy-stealing vampire with no free will. After being rescued by a beautiful girl that shares her blood with him and gives him back that free will, they regroup with the Akiba Freedom Fighters, a collection of his friends and family, all aiming to protect the citizens of Akiba from these manufactured vampires and allow all otakus to live their lives any way they want. As you can expect, this story is wacky and full of anime tropes one after another. We've got a figurine-obsessed protag, shut-in hermit of a little sister, a tomboy childhood friend that would rather scold and beat him up than reveal her feelings, and the list goes on. But there is a pretty decent story here. The various routes have good romance paths for each of the girls. Just keep in mind that it is very tropey from start to finish. Also, for those wondering, it's completely separate from the other games of the series, so you don't have to play one to play this one. It's all standalone. When it comes to gameplay, this is a 3D beat-em-up game with a bit of RPG mechanics thrown in. As you play, you'll explore parts of a realistic recreation of Akiba, while occasionally doing battle with enemies by fighting and beating up various body parts in order to defeat them. Now let's first talk about the changes and additions they made to Director's Cut. From a handheld perspective, the PS Vita version didn't have access to Toy Box and the Switch does. Toy Box mode allows you to start the game with every armor piece and weapon unlocked from the get-go, along with all the different character skins to use outside of just the protag. Not only does this let you use whatever you want from the get-go, but giving you a full inventory allows you to massively sell unneeded items and completely max out the upgrades for your preferred outfit the moment your little sister's shop becomes available. But the main new addition is the Kati route, fully voiced by the English cast as this game's quote-unquote true ending. Kati was the only main heroine that didn't get a route in the original, and while I'm not too sold on some of the out-of-nowhere story beats involved, it did give the game a proper and final feeling conclusion. That's pretty much the only new addition, but we should also talk about some changes they made. Many of the billboards and advertisements around the game are different now, across all platforms. Even the Steam version on PC was updated with a lot of the old billboards of Conception 2, Mind Zero, Trails of Cold Steel, and the Hyperdimension Neptunia anime being changed into videos of NPCs walking around Akiba and ads for Hellbound and Debriefed, the remake of Akiba's Trip 1 from a couple years back. We do still have a couple of the old ads, like the Ragnarok Odyssey Ace bus that drives around on the streets, but most of them were changed. And there is one other alteration that doesn't bother me at all, but might be worth mentioning to anyone out there that does not like censorship. In the original, there was a derogatory line in the social media pitter part of the game, referring to someone as a trap. If you don't know what that is, it's a male character that's designed to look feminine to the point that they are often mistaken for a female. The line would change from what you're seeing here where they say, "Nobody asked you, you trap," to what you're seeing here saying, "You're not fooling anybody, okay?" Again, the change doesn't bother me, but I know it bothers some others. Now, main progression. In this game, you will be walking around an accurate recreation of Akihabara, or at least parts of it. The original game did this as well, but 2 brought in more areas and gave you larger sections to look around. Stores, buildings, and even streets and walkways are accurate to the real Akiba. So accurate that when I was looking for the Comic Zen store to see if the Neptunia billboard was still in the game, I used Google Maps on my laptop to locate it in comparison to the Sega building and was able to follow those directions on the real map and found the in-game location in the same place. Anyways, you progress this game by doing main missions, having you go to a specific area in the game to advance the story, normally involving scenes followed up by combat with enemies in that area. Then the story points you to a new area and the process repeats. There are side missions you can do as well, having you hunt people down for various reasons, like retrieving a stolen body pillow or recruiting for a new maid cafe. These give you unique rewards, at least if you aren't playing in Toy Box mode. Some of them are also useful for the girls, something you're going to want to make a note of as you advance the story. Like a visual novel, all of the girls in this game, Shizuku, Toko, Rin, Shion, and now Kati, all have their own romance and story routes you can unlock for the finale. To be able to get on this, you have to raise their affinity by choosing correct dialogue choices and having them travel with you during certain side quests so you can make more decisions and get closer to them. And then we get to combat, the most fun part of this game. Akiba's Trip 2 is a beat-em-up game just like the first. You get into little brawls out in the open where you can attack the head, torso, and legs of an opponent, each with their own health meter. Your goal is to damage them enough to grab them and rip off the armor from those body parts. Or in this series, strip their clothes off until they are fully exposed to the sunlight, letting those would-be vampires literally bake and dissolve right in front of you and all of the bystanders in the area. There's a lot of things you have to do and consider here as you grab the enemies and do a little minigame to strip their clothes off. Or do a QTE chain when you have a mob around you and try to move from one person to the next without going back to normal combat. Overall, fighting feels a lot better here. It was very basic and more one-on-one in the original game, and 2 gives you a lot of different moves you can do with directional input, charges, and just how every weapon works. You can use almost anything as a weapon here, from actual swords to body pillows, keyboards, and even smacking people around with rifles. And the great part about this is the freedom of choice. You can make anything you want into a god tier weapon at the end of the game. As I mentioned earlier, the protag's little sister lets you upgrade equipment. So long as you have the materials and money for it, you can make any tiny little weak weapon hit a power of 999 and be better than anything else. And that's about it for gameplay. I find this game to be a lot of fun. It's still very clearly shown that it was designed with the PS Vita in mind, since all the areas you walk in are larger than the first game, but they're still pretty small, filling the game with constant loading sequences as you move from place to place. And in terms of content and length, you will likely be spending around 10 hours or so on your first trek through the game, be it using a guide or not. I ended up spending about 15 hours overall on the Switch. The first 5 hours being me refreshing myself on the game's first half, and the other 10 with me restarting and going through the proper choices to unlock the Kati route and getting that ending. Next up is presentation. While it isn't a huge spike upwards from the old Vita version, the Switch makes this game look good. There's more shading and shadows going on with the character models, and many NPCs will load into a map much quicker, making it so that you aren't endlessly hunting an area for a red quest NPC that hasn't loaded in yet, a problem that I believe plagued the Vita and PS3 versions back in the day. Performance is quite good as well. It's a stable 30 FPS for the entire game outside of small little cinematic animations for the stripping. It is a bit odd when you get lengthy delays at the end of battles while you wait for the next scene to start, but overall it's much better than the last handheld release. The load times have also improved. Back on PS3 and Vita, loading through each area would take upward of 10 seconds, while on the Switch each load is about 3 to 4 seconds. And that brings us to battery life. Akiba's Trip 2 gives the original and light models a battery range of about 2.5 to 4 hours. And the V2 and OLED models got 5 to 6.5 hours as I played. Now in conclusion, Akiba's Trip 2 returns to the handheld world mostly the same, but with a new route, toy box mode, and some odd advertisement changes. On the downside, there are some slight frame drops in stripping animations, and some parts of Kati's new route are very sudden and odd to me, but it's still a great little game about ripping people's clothes off in public and being surrounded by otaku culture. Reviews to Go rates Akiba's Trip Undead and Undressed Director's Cut for the Nintendo Switch a 9 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.